Ethically Questionable is electrified by Polestar, the Swedish electric performance brand created to accelerate the shift to zero tailpipe emissions. Their approach to transparency means every car they sell has a carbon impact report so you can drive with a conscience. Hey guys, welcome back to Ethically Questionable. I'm your host, Jamila Brown, here with Jenn and Aisling for another special edition of EQ News. Jenn and Aisling, how are we this week?
Very good. Happy
All
to be
good.
here.
England won last night.
Woo woo! Are you repping England in the World Cup match? I never know who to
I rep England, South Korea. Yeah, that's it really. I don't really rep America. I'm not a fan of the American football team, sorry.
Oh, scandalous. Soccer team, actually. Aisling, what about you? Are you watching or do you care?
I'm not even watching, but if I was, it would not be England, I'm afraid. 800
well,
years.
Ireland's not in it, is it?
Yeah, but 800 years of oppression means I can't.
Yeah. Fair enough. Great. Well, look, let's get into the show. I think at the top, Jenn, you've got an update on the very disgusting, very upsetting salmon story that you shared with Aisling and I last week. Let's hear it.
So let me get my notes up.
Oh, God.
So the reason why I wanted to give an update is because I kind of went down this like rabbit hole of being obsessed with looking up salmon since we did our news update, because it's always been something on my mind, like since I took oceanography, as I talked about last time. But actually, somebody sent me someone to look into. They were like, you should follow Jim Murray. He has an MBE. I think he used to be an actor or something. I don't know his full background. But basically, he does a podcast called The Last Salmon. And on this week, he interviewed the managing director of Mowi, which is like the biggest, one of the biggest like salmon farms in the UK.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? He has a podcast. His podcast is only about salmon.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I haven't listened to the whole thing, but like I can read you the description. It's called The Last Salmon, a show to inspire hope and solutions for a species in crisis, hosted by renowned actor Jim Murray. The Last Salmon highlights the tragic story that is unfolding for an iconic species and finds inspiration from people fighting to save the salmon. So it's all about salmon.
I fucking love that. And look, if I thought that we were niche, like, go Jim.
Oh, I know, right? Exactly. So basically, he interviewed the MD. I think his name is Ben Hadfield. He basically was very open. I have to admit, the MD I thought was quite open. You know, this wasn't like a Prince Andrew going on Newsnight type of interview. Like he knew what he was talking about. You can tell he was like in the day to day. And they talked a lot about the challenges around farm salmon, the effects on the planet. What's happening with these, when the farm salmon escapes, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a study by a bunch of scientists led by someone called Philip McGinty. And he basically did a study around the effect of farm salmon being escaped and how it's affecting the extinction of wild salmon. And essentially after their study, they call this whole system of farm salmon getting to wild salmon extinction vortex, which I thought, to be honest, was a very catchy name. And essentially what they're talking about is that they talk about the fact that farm salmon's DNA now mixing with wild salmon is essentially making the species worse. It's making them go extinct.
Oh, no.
Obviously, there's nuances to this. It's just one study. I think there's two sides to everything. And, what he talked about is that, there are a lot of challenges. They invest $60 million a year to try to prevent these issues that come about. There's a lot that he talks about. And I'm not saying that, everything he says makes it right. It definitely doesn't. There's still a major issue. But I thought one of the interesting topics that came up is they talked a lot about why is there not like enclosed, why are we growing these salmon in the sea? Like, why are we not growing them in enclosed, controlled areas? We're growing them in the sea where they can escape and affect wild salmon. So that was like this big kind of conversation that they had. However, the argument from the person at Mowi was that actually it's climate change that's affecting salmon populations more than their escaped salmons.
I hate the blame pushing.
Yeah, it's a little bit of deflection,
Yeah.
As someone who, Ashlyn and I worked in PR for a long time, so we used to teach people about how to crisis manage in an interview. And a lot of times as you kind of deflect. So sometimes he would deflect to other industries being like, when it comes to cows and this, it's, this and this and this. And then it's like, well, it's a very different scenario. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, look, I'm sure there'll be more news about salmon, as we go on. So keep us updated.
I know
Yeah.
I've had to eat so much this week, Jen, and I just keep thinking of the lice whenever I eat it.
You've had a lot of salmon this
I had
week.
so much salmon this week. My friend came to visit and was like, I've brought food for us. It's salmon. And then I went into a restaurant and the only thing on the menu that I could eat was salmon. And I was like, oh my God, there's salmon everywhere.
What about like the salmon sperm facial?
Good point.
I don't know enough. I mean, I actually haven't I almost so I went to South Korea where that facial has become popular. And I actually use PRDN products, but I don't actually know a lot about the origin of that. I would imagine it's a byproduct of the industry, in all honesty. I wouldn't imagine that they're like growing salmon and killing them just for like a salmon sperm facial. Do you know?
And for anyone who isn't into facials, it is a trendy facial, right?
Yeah, we're not.
A very good friend of mine gets it all the time. She's been going to her facialist for ages, and then she went in and was like, I want the salmon sperm facial. I've heard lots about it. And her facialist was like, that's what we've been doing, love. It's just called something else.
Yeah, it's just called something else. But I think it yields very good results.
Right. So moving on, Ashley, please tell us, what's your ethically questionable story of the week?
So the story I read this week was in the FT. I feel like I always seem to be bringing very serious topics to this podcast. I'll move on to like kind of carbon reporting. Anyway, the story in the FT that caught my eye was, has net zero just become more realistic or has it become watered down? And basically, in a nutshell, so the SBTi, which is the Science Based Target Initiative, which I would say is probably the gold standard of corporate climate standards and reporting. So it started in 2015 and it's it's the gold standard. They have released a major update and it basically, in a nutshell, is giving companies more flexibility on how they reach net zero. So it means that companies don't have to be as strict. So there's a huge kind of debate around this, right, in the sustainability world. Like, is this a good thing? Is it better to get businesses on the journey, or are they just rolling everything back? So I don't know. It's challenging. What do you think?
What do you think? Where do you land on it?
I always think it's better to I feel like it's better to bring people on the journey, get on the treadmill of improvement instead of being like, you're too bad. Like I always give the analogy, if you went into therapy and your therapist was a bit like, oh, sorry, you're a bit too fucked. Can't work with you. Do you know what I mean? I'm not taking your money. Like just go and rot in prison. Like, I don't think that's how it should work. I think when it comes to sustainability, you have to bring businesses on the journey. But has it become watered down?
I guess I just don't understand why a company who wasn't interested in net zero before would now be incentivized to do it just because it's a little bit easier. Like, if you care, you care. If you don't, you don't.
I think it's more that bigger companies haven't been able to meet it. So they have 11,000 companies that they work with, and they haven't been able to get anywhere close.
Yeah. So I mean, my view is like large companies, first of all, in the UK and Europe, they have to report on this, right? So they have to report on it. They have to set science-based reduction targets. So which means that everyone that's like a certain size business has to measure carbon emissions in their own company and in their supply chain. And then they have to commit to reducing those emissions by 50%, right? Essentially by 2030 and around 90% by 2050. And they have to have clear, concrete targets towards that. I think that, and they use the word science-based target. It's all very boring and confusing, but like it's what we work in. So we've worked with companies on setting reduction targets and things like that. And I think that it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all. I think that there needs to be some flexibility because a lot of the reductions rely on other people. So an example would be like, I'm a beauty company and I need to reduce my transportation emissions by 50% by 2030. The only way I can do that is if I work with the transport company and the transport company then switches everything to EV or has all their, large trucks, switching to EV or a more sustainable fuel. Unfortunately, that also relies on technology. So right now, there's not tons of, 18-wheeler trucks like going around on electric, is it? Like
Okay.
they're all still diesel vehicles mostly. So it's like, what's the innovation and what's the drive so that it just relies on so many things. It is really hard. And I can kind of understand why they are maybe being more flexible on those targets to allow people to figure out different ways of reaching them.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the big rule is that companies can still be considered compliant even if they miss targets, provided they can demonstrate they made genuine best efforts and they
Yeah.
explain the barriers and they show evidence of the action, which is what you're saying, really.
Honestly,
I
I
think that's
believe in that
okay.
because
That's okay because as somebody who's like worked in a company trying to get our emissions down, it's not super straightforward. Like there's
no.
so many challenges, so many hurdles, like Jem was saying, so much technology that we're still waiting for. And I think, yeah, I think reward effort for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to have in place because I think when it comes to sustainability and when it comes to any business, we all set goals at the beginning of every year. We try to reach them, but like we're not always going to reach them. But there needs to be some understanding that progress was made or that that effort was put in to continue that progress. Otherwise, we're all just going to get annoyed by it and stop doing it, right?
Yeah.
Because like I know, like I'm
Yeah.
that kind of person. I'm like, I tried really hard. Like, tell me I did, at least kind of a good job.
Mm.
Yeah, I
And
think
that's
what's
basic.
different is people opting out because they're like, well, this is impossible.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And that's what the FT was saying is it's really about the sustainability movement entering a new phase because the
Yeah.
last decade was focused on ambitious targets. So it was all like target, target, target. And now we're
Mm,
moving into the phase of can we
mm,
deliver? Like what is
mm.
actually realistic?
Yeah.
Um, you know
You
what
know
happened.
what? Do you know what I think is interesting about this language though, is that the like softening around targets is exactly the same sort of narrative we saw with DEI. It's like no quotas, no targets, soften all that stuff
Interesting.
up. And now DEI is like, I mean, almost taboo to talk about
mhm.
in a boardroom. So interesting shift.
Oh, I'm doing a talk tomorrow and it's in my talk tomorrow. I'll be talking about DE and I. So I'm still flying the flag, Jamila.
Well done. Well done. Okay, should we move on to the next story? It's what I've been thinking about a lot. So since our episode last week, Elon Musk, ugh, obviously, um, did the IPO for his company, SpaceX, which made him the world's first trillionaire. And I've seen so much backlash about this online. Not only because, like, why the fuck does anybody need to be a multi-billionaire, much less a trillionaire? But also, of all people, like, why Elon Musk, who has spent the last 18 months, like, slashing budgets from USAID, or healthcare for modern America, for Americans, just, all this stuff to actively go around and take away aid and support and resource and finances for the people who need it most, and then come out the other side
Yeah.
richer than most countries, the richest man ever, it's
He just
just,
fired thousands of people who worked for the US government, like unnecessarily, some of them because they hired a lot of them back. It's like
yeah.
it's like it doesn't make sense to me that yeah.
And I think I have so many like thoughts still to process about all of this just because I think it is so layered, this conversation. Because, in one respect, it's not that people who are investing in SpaceX are rewarding Elon Musk. Like they believe in the mission of like space telecommunications and like going to Mars and all this sort of shit, right? And the advancement of our economy. But yeah, I just think there's so many questions here and I really want to dig into it. And maybe we can talk more about it next week. A term though that I saw floating around, a few terms that I've seen floating around in relation to this though have really got my attention. So one is the need for us as a society to relieve people from their financial obesity. I love that. Elon Musk is a fat fuck. No, I'm joking. He's financially obese.
PHAT. Oh no.
Yeah. um And I've seen some others about like we talk about like, the poverty line and what that looks like, but do we talk about the wealth line and like the ethics of going over that, and I
Yeah.
just think there's a lot of really interesting language floating out around there. So something I'll definitely spend more time like thinking about this week, but would love to hear any initial thoughts you guys have, and if it's something you want to dive into next week.
Well, interesting. I saw like an infographic recently on like, the top billionaires and who gives the most, to like charitable or, social or environmental causes. And it's like, I think out of like all the billionaires, like he's the lowest. I mean, I think you can imagine the highest is going to be like Mackenzie Scott and Melinda Gates, right? Like because
Women.
it's women, yeah. So they're like that. They give more.
Warren Buffett, doesn't he give quite a bit?
Warren Buffett does do quite a lot, but they give more than than the other guys. Jeff Bezos. That even Mackenzie Scott gives more than her ex, and he has more money. Do you know? He has like the Bezos Earth Fund and all that stuff. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting because Elon Musk was definitely one of the lower ones, considering like how much wealth he has. Like you're kind of like, what's all that money for? Like, because you have like enough money, like your kids are like good. Like they were good on like, a few billion probably.
Yeah.
So you've got like 5 generations of wealth for your entire like compound of family, do you know? And you're like 20 like partners or whatever that have children. It's like you've got that.
Yeah.
You've got that set. So like what else is it for is what I'm wondering. And it's like, why? It's like, I get it's like a status, but like you've reached that status. You're a trillionaire now. Like why wouldn't you just give like 2/3 of that back? Why?
I remember like when he was offering to buy Twitter, there was a post something where he had offered to buy Twitter for $44 billion, and someone said like, for $44 billion, you could like feed everybody who needs support based on the World Health Organization for like the next decade. And he was like, show me a plan on how I'll do that and I'll give you the money instead. They did show him the plan. Of course, he bought Twitter anyways, right? It's like,
of course, like.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a doctor say that it's just illness. It's that thing of like, if there was a monkey in the jungle collecting all the bananas and hoarding all the bananas, you would like look at the monkeys if they were totally ill and insane. Like, what's wrong? You can only eat so many bananas, and it's
Jane Goodall study.
Yeah.
But I also think there's like an element where they want there to be poverty. So because it keeps their status in play. So I do believe that, like if you look at countries that have a massive wealth divide, so where people are really rich or really poor, which is most developing countries, they do it on purpose so that the wealthy keep that status and cannot lose it.
Yeah.
But then it's like, but you can still have the status of like first trillionaire ever or trillionaire and also like give loads of money back into like
I agree.
Capitalist, society say that's the whole point is like let the winners of the game decide how they distribute the wealth back into the system, but then they don't.
But if we solve world poverty, there'll no longer be a divide. There'll no longer be people that are underrepresented with less opportunity, and he will not always hold his status of power if that happens. Maybe, I'm not saying he's consciously sitting there thinking of this, but I do feel like it's unconsciously driving that.
I also put it, because I agree, it's like capitalism is failing, right? It's obviously not working. That amount of wealth and power shouldn't be as concentrated. I did kind of do a bit of research on like why others don't see it as a problem. So what's his view? What do other people think? Who thinks it's okay? And the first would be that they think net worth isn't cash. So most of his wealth comes from shares. It doesn't mean he has $1 trillion actually sitting in a bank account. It's the first one. The second is that wealth can reflect value creation. So it's because he's become a trillionaire because he's created companies that, accelerate electric vehicles. It does say renewable energy adaptation. Not sure about that. Advanced space technology. And he's created useful AI products. So he's creating lots of work and jobs, etc. And obviously all the investors benefit.
Look, he is creating jobs, and I do think he has revolutionized electric vehicles. I cannot, as somebody that works in sustainability, like I cannot deny that. He's done more for electric vehicles than I think any car company out there, personally.
This podcast is sponsored by Polestar, by the way. I'm joking. But you know what I think is interesting about that, Jen? I think we actually talked about this. Yes, 100% Tesla changed the game. And when he started it, talked about it being this like revolution for renewable energy. But then recently, he's gone on to say that there's enough fuel for us to keep using, gas and oil for the rest of
Yeah,
our lives, and climate
I
change is up.
know.
So he's like totally changed the narrative on like,
Yeah.
why these sorts of brands are revolutionary important for like the future of everyone. And this goes back to his like whole, he'll be fine in the climate crisis because he's hoarded all the wealth. He can build himself the Superdome like they did on that Apple show Extrapolations. And
Yeah.
that's fucked. But at least he made some EVs. Like, please.
Yeah. I mean, but on the whole thing about how he doesn't have $1 trillion sitting in his account, it's like, yes, I'm well aware of that, but like he he has a ton of money, like, and a ton of assets, and it's like there is plenty of wealth that he has that could be used in a way that can solve a lot of the world's problems.
Yeah.
And he's not doing that. He doesn't want to do that.
He's not going to use it himself. Do you know what I mean? Either. So it's like,
He just doesn't feel like a good person.
He's not right.
Yeah.
It's sad how the baddies can get to the top. Kind of makes you like not feel good.
Yeah. Anyways, let's move on because I'm going to go down a rabbit hole on this.
Same.
Okay, so Jen, let's bring it back to you. You've got, speaking of government,
Yeah.
you've also got a news story. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think this is a big one. We all have children, on this show. A lot of people have children. Social media is a big issue. And it's a big issue when you have kids, online safety. So Keir Starmer has announced this week that they are pushing for a social media ban for anyone under 16 years old. So I can read off what that means. So which social media apps will be banned for under 16s? Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, X, and Facebook will all be blocked. The ban is for under 16s. They can't access user-to-user platforms, which means that they can't access platforms where they can post material, talk to people, and use platforms that have algorithms that are going to provide recommended content, which is basically like all the social media things now. What won't be banned, however, is there are some things, for example, because they're looking at Australia a lot, because Australia's already done this, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of learnings that they can take already, which I think is quite helpful. But the in Australia, social media apps social media apps that are not going to be restricted is like YouTube Kids, Lego Play, Google Classroom, and Pinterest will be exempt because they are used in like a lot of the learning process for children, apparently.
I'm delighted. I feel like it's a great thing. So what, Australia went first? I remember
Australia's done it already. They're already doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously there's learnings from that already, but it's not going to solve itself in like 1 year. Do you know? Like this has to be something that's in place for years to come.
I do look at my friends' kids and like my family in Ireland and stuff, and my family the teenagers or the preteens who don't live in London seem so much younger, and it's much easier to police their social media. Like they're definitely just not on it. Do you know what I mean? It's like no one in their school is. But then as you move in towards cities and London, I feel like everyone grows up so quickly and social media just seems so negative. Like I just look at the kind of young girls on social media and the pressure, and it just feels like too much. And I think the conversation has always been like, how do we make it safer? How do we make social media safer? And now the conversation is becoming, should they be on social media at all? No. But Jamila, relevant for you, your daughter.
Yeah, definitely. So my daughter is turning 11 in 2 weeks. And when we were telling her, and so we're at this like pivotal moment right now where she's about to start secondary school. And this is when kids get phones. So she's had an iPad, she has like a little like Google Chrome laptop sort of thing that she does her homework on when she needs to. But now she's like laser focused on what phone she's going to get. And there's been this big debate in our house for the whole school year about whether she gets the brick phone or what she really wants, the iPhone, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked so much about like, social media and this and that, and it's really bad for your health. And I don't want you to have a screen addiction. And you're already, pretty hooked on that iPad. Like it's only going to get worse. Like, da, 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 da. And when I told her about the ban, I was reading off like which ones are going to be banned. I was like, Instagram, Facebook. She's like, don't care. Don't use a Snapchat. She's like, oh, but okay, fine, whatever. Not that she's ever on Snapchat, but occasionally she'll like take my phone and do like a little filter or whatever.
Mm.
Um, what are the other ones? Twitter didn't care, Reddit didn't care, but YouTube, she was like, they're taking away YouTube. She was like, couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And it caught me thinking like, fuck, how much YouTube is she actually watching? Like I have restrictions on her iPad, you know, and I've learned this from, my friends who let their kids have iPhones in the States much earlier. I learned how to like lock it down and it shuts off at certain times and blah, 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 blah. But I'm like, she's really like, I don't want to say hooked, but like, she was really like distraught about the fact that she might not have access to YouTube anymore. And I was like, well, then great. I mean, then it is a good thing because clearly you shouldn't be like that attached to this. Like, do you know what I mean? And when I had Lucy Cleland in the Polestar for the episode a few weeks ago, we were talking about how awful the scrolling, much less like all of the content and the way that it's influencing you to think certain things or have certain behaviors, but just the fact of like sitting there mindlessly scrolling all the time, how dumb it's making all of us and how much like
Yeah.
ADHD and like, poor attention spans and stuff we're getting as a result. She was like, I have a feeling that in like 10 years, we're all going to look back at scrolling and social media the way we look at smoking now. Like, how could we have lived in a society where everyone just did that and thought it was okay and healthy? So I think this is the first step towards that. And I'm really here for it. And it actually like makes me feel better about letting Ellie have the iPhone versus the brick phone, because when we went to her school induction, they were like, there's lots of good things that can be on a smartphone, like Google Classroom, which I think you mentioned, and like
Duolingo.
homework apps and, whatever. And like, the ability to like track them on their way to and from school. And they were like, but things that should absolutely not be on there are things like WhatsApp or Instagram or whatever. And I wouldn't have let her have those things anyways. But now I've got a little bit more like oomph behind me, and it's not just all on me. It's like you can't even get into them, Ellie. Not that she's asking for them yet, but I can feel that coming, as she moves into a bigger school. So
Can
I'm
I
pro
ask,
ban.
is Ellie the kind of kid who'll in a couple of years be able to figure out a VPN? I know I was. Like I definitely would have like not been on it, but I would have 100% had a VPN sorted by the time I was 12. Same.
Ellie's pretty innocent, and I think, but she's still in primary school. So I just think who knows what's going to happen in this like transition to preteen. And it's like, it's not even like the 10 and 11-year-olds that I'm worried about for this. It's like the 14-year-olds and the 13-year-olds who are like rebellious and going to try and figure it out anyways, So let's see. But I think the more conversations that are in the media about like how icky this stuff is, the better, because then it's not just coming from mean mommy, it's like part of the culture shift. And already I think there's a really like rising trend of Gen A and Gen Z not being on social media because they think it's gross, or they're starting to think it's gross. And I think that's probably for the best.
Yeah.
So. The only flip side is for the people who are like anti-ban, and I've been thinking about this, are like the kids who are like in isolated rural communities who are maybe queer or maybe other and just can't find their community IRL where they live. Social media has been like a lifeline for a lot of them. And so I do think of them and think, how do we as a society continue to support and uplift them and help them find resources, if not via social media? And I think that's a good sort of like thing to work towards, right?
I think that's a really good point, because I think that, it is, there are also positive sides of social media that maybe don't get highlighted as much because, there's a lot of the educational side that I think we forget. Like we didn't have access to that as kids. Like I remember 2 summers ago, I went to Norway, and one of our cousins there, she was 6. Oh no, so she was 7, and she spoke like perfect English. And I said to her mom, I was like, oh, has she been doing English classes, or like, do you speak to her in English at home or something? Like, how does she learn such like her English is amazing, like for being only 7 years old and your main language being Norwegian. And she was like, no, she just learned it from YouTube.
Oh.
I
Yeah,
literally
but,
learned.
I have Scandinavian friends who are like our age, so obviously didn't grow up with social media. They have great English, and I used to ask them, "How did you learn English?" And they said, "Watching Friends on TV." So you don't
Yeah,
have to, like there's
it
other
doesn't
ways.
have to be YouTube, but I mean, I think that like, I'm just saying that it's like a place where you can learn to speak it, or you can see kids your own age that are speaking other languages, things like that. But
But they're
yeah,
also
is it
saying that
used for that? I don't know. But
but
yeah.
they're also saying YouTube Kids might still be around, it sounds like. I don't know.
YouTube Kids will still be around because that's I think YouTube, I think that's the thing is like I think YouTube have been quite smart in recognizing that actually before these bans happened, they recognized that there was an issue with their platform. So they needed to create a better protected platform for children. So
Mhm.
I do respect, I'm sure we can all go into complaints about Google, but I do respect the fact that they took some onus and tried to are trying to make a better, more protected platform for children. I don't see anyone else doing that.
Well, do you know what I was just gonna say? I've been seeing lots of ads over the last few months, and obviously this is intentional, about the new Instagram teen accounts, and I'm like, I don't even
Yes.
wanna know. I
Yeah, I've
don't even
seen that
want.
on
Neither
LinkedIn.
do I. I think it's BS. Like, yeah. I don't because like I think it needs to be like I think what YouTube have done right is that it's not like, oh, YouTube Kids is just on YouTube. It's like a separate app, It's like and you can't there's certain things that you can't do on YouTube Kids, like the scrolling aspect of it. Um, you know, I think I think YouTube can be a great tool for children because like for example, like my daughter loves art and it's incredible for helping her learn to draw. And honestly, it's like that's mostly what she uses YouTube for.
Hmm.
But I actually removed YouTube from her iPad for a few years because it became this weird scrolling thing of watching things for 5 seconds, getting a dopamine hit, and then like
I don't
it became weird. So like I actually took it off and my 5-year-old doesn't have it on his iPad. But now that my daughter's like more mature, at 8, but she can make better decisions and she checks with me more. I feel like she can start using it, but like she only uses it for things like art and stuff like that.
yeah.
So it does have this great thing, but I think at the same time, I do think that Instagram is just like, oh, set up a teen account. And like, I'm like, but what does that mean? Like, it's not separate. You're still interacting with adults. I feel like, I don't know. I just feel like it's weird. Like,
Yeah,
not,
I mean, I think there is
it's not
something
thoughtful.
about blocking, who can and can't speak to you, and parents having more control over, like, the interaction there, but hey-ho. I will say I did go to a Roblox event last week, where they were talking about internet safety and children and, like, the things that they have coming out, splitting Roblox into, like, a few different versions for different age groups, which either, like, completely eliminate or severely restrict, like, who you can and can't speak to, on there. And interestingly, so that was a room like full of like people who work in internet safety and policy here. And the message that I kind of got from that event, and not from the people who worked at Roblox, but like from all the different charity partners and like organizations and stuff and like parent groups, was like, we think a ban doesn't put actually enough pressure on the social media companies to do something.
Okay.
Like, they're still incentivized to kind of let people get around it or whatever. But what they really need to do is work a lot more closely, like, with these social media companies to, like, regulate them to change their behavior full stop,
And
rather
that's
than saying, like, "You, the under 16-year-olds, aren't allowed to do it." It's like, "No, you, TikTok, are not allowed to do XYZ."
And do you know what? They're used to that from working in China. So when I was
Yeah.
in China in 2017, 2018, the whole kind of doom scrolling thing was being addressed. And it was like, how is it made educational? And obviously the government's so powerful there. It's like you either do it and you're making this a tool for good, or you go.
Yeah.
It's very draconian. And Instagram, like so many of the social media platforms, were blocked then. But LinkedIn wasn't. So you kind of end up using LinkedIn as more of a like messaging kind of app. It was different. But I do
Hilarious.
think it can be a force for good, but it has to be really, really patrolled.
One of the, like, most insane things I've ever heard about TikTok, oh, it's not insane, but, like, interesting, is that, like, TikTok in China is, like, all, like, math and engineering videos, and then TikTok in America is, like, intentionally, like, people doing stupid dances.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I mean,
Like,
it's like, yeah, it's like not intelligent at all. When I go on TikTok, I actually feel like I like lose brain cells, like honestly. But can I read a quote? So this article I read on The Guardian, they had a quote from someone at YouTube, about the ban and what they, and it's funny because they've done YouTube Kids already. So I don't, yeah. Anyways, here's what they said about the ban. They said, YouTube is a vital resource for young people, educators, and parents. Blanket bans push kids out of such curated, supervised, beneficial experiences and towards anonymous, less safe services. Do you feel like this is going to push children into using platforms that are less safe? I'm not sure I believe that, but what do you guys think?
What are they? Like, what are they?
I mean, I'm sure. I mean, they could probably set up an account on Truth Social. Do you know?
Fucking hell.
I'm just throwing it out there. Like, there are other. I'm sure there's other platforms, but I don't know if that's entirely like accurate. And also, I don't think that's the only solution. Do you know? Like, I'm a solution oriented person. So when I see people being like, "Oh, you can't just do a blanket ban. It's it's going to do." It's like, no. The blanket ban is there. Like, the government has a job to protect children in this country. They are doing their job. They have seen an issue with social media platforms that, they've seen studies where it's caused suicide among teenagers. They've seen these issues happen, and they investigated this off of I think it was like 120,000 people signed a petition. Like they're investigating, like they're putting this in because they are listening to the people that live within the country. So I think that it's important that they're doing their job to try to protect teenagers. And now it's like up to everyone else to work towards a better solution. And everyone's just kind of being like, oh no, I don't, it's like, it's not a good idea. It's like, how about you just go with the idea and try to fix it and make it better?
This is what I mean. It's like, look, there is clearly a problem. None of you bitches are doing anything about it. Here's a starting.
Thank you.
Go from there. Instead of being like, no, don't do anything.
That's the thing. It's like, I'm like, for once, like at least the government's actually trying to do something. Because normally they just like, it's not our responsibility. It's not our it's the social media platforms. It's the parents. It's this and that. For once, they're trying to take responsibility. Like, let's like celebrate that and like try to encourage like a better world for our kids,
I also hate all this commentary I'm seeing that's like the government is doing this because they're trying to like control your kids and they're trying to push the country towards the digital ID, which none of us want. I'm like, or they're just worried about your kid like getting fucking anorexia from looking at weird shit on the internet.
It's like, I just don't understand that. It's like, no one can just like appreciate, like, we always have to find like, oh, there's an alternative like motive to this. And it's like, you know what, actually, like, what do you want? Because one day, if something happens to your child because of social media, you're going to be right. You're going to hate social media. You're going to be on it. You're going to be blaming it. But then when the government tries to do something to mitigate that issue, you're like, no, it's not okay. Like, which one fucking is it? You can't win. Like,
yeah. All right. Well, look, guys, I think we'll leave it there for this week's episode of EQ News. Jen and Aisling, thank you so much, as always, for your brilliance and your insight and your juicy gossip stories of the news and the government and the world and our lives. So that's it from us this week, guys. We will catch you next week on Friday for EQ News. Follow us. We've got a newly launched Instagram channel at Questionable. Speaking of social media, we're also on TikTok and YouTube Shorts at Ethically Questionable Pod. So get in touch with us unless you are under 16 because you're not allowed to anymore. And let us know what you'd like to hear more from us about. Until next week, guys. See you then.
Bye.
Thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of Ethically Questionable. For more info, thoughts, ideas, conversation starters, you can follow me, your host, Jamila, at Jamila Faye.